What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we are back with another Hunter guide for Star Wars Hunters, and today we're going to be focusing on Zaina. Now, Zaina is currently the only support hunter in the game. Support class is obviously to support your teammates, so she is obviously very much based on sort of helping her team stay alive and just do better in general. So she's a very pivotal character, and personally I do think that Zaina is actually probably the most important hunter in the game. And although she can be a little bit hard to play, I'm going to try and go through some of that with you guys and help you guys get a little bit better with Zaina, because in my opinion a good Zaina can essentially win a game on their own. Before we get into it, if you guys are new to the channel, then definitely hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. There's going to be plenty more Star Wars Hunters content on the way in 2022, but with that being said, let's get stuck right into it. So getting stuck into Zaina's base stats, she has 200 HP, which is pretty much what you would expect to be the average amount of HP in the game, but obviously the fact that she can heal teammates as well as heal herself, she is essentially a bit of a tank at the same time. Her blaster deals 20 damage per shot and has a rate of fire of 108 rounds per minute, or 1.8 shots per second, which is a pretty low rate of fire. However, 20 damage per shot is actually somewhat decent anyway, so it does balance out a little bit. She's definitely still not on the stronger side when it comes to dealing damage, but obviously that's not really her goal. But that being said, the DL44 can still deal some damage. Now, as for her sprint speed, she will cover 100 meters in 16.84 seconds, which is actually only just slower than Reeve, and obviously Reeve is a melee hunter. So Zaina has some really good mobility, and she's probably up there with some of the best mobility in the entire game. And then on top of that, her augmented leap, which is her passive ability, actually gives her the ability to jump to higher ledges that only Amara Vex can get to, and obviously Reeve can get there with one of her abilities, but Zaina actually has that built in, so your regular jump is actually higher than pretty much everyone else in the game. Now, moving on to her abilities, she has 3 abilities and obviously the ultimate ability as well, and we're going to go through all the stats and the cooldowns and stuff like that. So the first ability that she has is called the Back to Bomb, and this heals Zaina for 50 HP or all of your teammates for 100 HP as well, and it obviously just heals anyone who's within the area of effect. The area of effect is 8 meters, so essentially 4 meters in each direction, and the cooldown for this ability is 7 seconds, which is actually very fast, especially considering how good it is. Her next ability is called the Dodge Roll, and this one gives her invulnerability while she sort of dodges out of the way of damage. And not only is it good for actually avoiding damage, but it is also a really good way to just actually speed up her mobility even further, as it does allow you to get around the map a lot faster than the regular sprint. Now, the Dodge Roll has an 8-second cooldown, which is again pretty decent considering this ability is very decent, and it will actually send you 8 meters forward, so it's a pretty large dodge, and it is very useful for getting you out of the way, especially when it comes to coming up against those melee hunters. Now, her third ability is called the Sticky Bomb, and this one is obviously just a grenade that she throws, and it will stick to anyone that it hits, and it actually deals 200 damage per hit when it actually sticks to the enemy, or it'll deal 100 and downwards with a non-stuck grenade, and that just means that if you land it right at their feet but it doesn't stick, it will just deal 100 damage, and then essentially over the distance, you know, if it's 5 meters away, then it will deal a lot less damage. So it seems to work out that every meter is essentially like a 10% drop off in damage, and the distance overall is 5 meters, so after 5 meters it just won't deal any damage to the enemy. This one has a 12-second cooldown, which is obviously a little bit longer than the other two, but with that being said, it can deal 200 damage per grenade, so obviously it does probably need a little bit of a longer cooldown. Now, moving on to her ultimate ability, this one is called Rallying Cry, and this one causes Zaina to put down a flag that actually essentially heals anyone on your team who's within 50 meters, and it will actually give them 225 HP, plus that actually stacks on top of their base HP. So if your teammates are all at full health, then they'll all just have 225 HP more than what they normally have. For example, Groz has 400 HP, so this will actually give him 625 HP in total if he does have full health when you use it. The cooldown for this one is 2 minutes and 50 seconds, which I actually thought they all had the same cooldown time, but the last one that we did for Reeve, that actually had a 2 minute and 45 second cooldown. So it seems that this ultimate actually has an extra 5 seconds, which considering how long it is, it barely makes any difference, and obviously you can just increase that with the ult pickups, so the extra 5 seconds really doesn't make that much of a difference. Now, moving on to the loadouts, and as of right now I actually keep all of the loadouts the same regardless of the game mode. For me personally, at least with Zaina, and the same was with Reeve as well, the game mode that I'm playing doesn't really change how I'm actually going to play that character. So this loadout that I'm going to go through is used for both control and for escort, and most likely when Huttball gets added as well, this will probably be the exact same loadout. For the Back to Bomb, I actually just used the core loadout. The other ones seem a little bit unnecessary to me. They kind of just make you jump through hoops in a way, because one will either give you, you know, the same amount of health, but it just gives it to you and your teammates a lot slower, and the other one has a seemingly shorter range. So for me personally, I just prefer the core one. You just throw this down and it gives your teammates 100 HP on the spot. So the core one to me is definitely the best. As for the Dodge Roll, I actually use tactical tactical. Now I did used to use the one that gives you 2 rolls, but what we found in the Hunters Discord is that the tactical loadout actually changes it so that your first shot after a roll actually deals 100 damage. Now initially I read that and thought it would just be, you know, a bit extra damage on the actual normal shot, so maybe even doubling it to 40, but no, it actually does 100 damage with a single shot from her DL44. And the other thing about that is it doesn't actually count the first shot if you miss. It is actually only the first shot that lands it, so for me this one is a no-brainer, and this one is actually really overpowered, to be honest. You can actually take out most hunters in, you know, no time at all if you play your cards right, so for me this one is an absolute no-brainer. Now for the sticky bomb I used the heavy loadout, and this one just gives it a bigger explosion area at the cost of a longer fuse, and it actually can't stick to the enemies. Now the bigger explosion area doesn't necessarily give it any more damage, it only still deals the same amount of damage, but what I've found is that especially in game modes like Control where the enemy team kind of bunch up together when they're trying to push the objective, the bigger explosion area just means that you kind of deal more damage in total. It doesn't deal more damage to an individual, but obviously it's going to blow up in a larger area, meaning overall you're actually going to deal more damage with this one more often than not. So for me this one seems to be really decent. It kind of wipes out teams really quickly. You can deal a bunch of damage, and then obviously if you and your team would sort of attack them at that time, you're going to be heading into that battle with heaps more HP than they have, and so again for me this one is an absolute no-brainer. Now moving on to just some basic tips for Zaina. Like I said, I actually personally believe that Zaina is the best hunter in the game if you play it correctly. Sure, there are other hunters like for example J3, who I think is probably a better one-on-one hunter. I think he can take on essentially anyone in the game, and in a one-on-one I would definitely take J3 over Zaina. But in terms of like the team aspect of the game and winning games rather than just sort of, you know, doing well yourself and getting a bunch of kills, I really do think that Zaina is absolutely the best hunter in the game, as a good Zaina can essentially just win the game on her own. The main tip you really need to know for Zaina is essentially that you just want to play for your team first. She's not the type of hunter that you want to run around trying to get big kill streaks and stuff, because although she can deal a lot of damage and she obviously has some very good survivability herself, you are much better off actually helping your teammates and trying to keep them alive, because what I've found is that when you keep your teammates alive, they're actually just going to kind of help you stay alive even longer, and so you might get a few less kills if you play really, you know, dedicated to your team. On the flip side of that, you're going to win essentially every single game that you play if you play your cards right, so definitely focus on your team more than trying to get kills. One useful tip is with the dodge roll, you want to roll away from your enemies and then actually deal that 100 damage with the tactical loadout. If you roll towards your enemies, obviously, especially if it's like a melee hunter, they're going to be able to deal damage to you, but if you roll away from them, it's going to gain you some ground, and then obviously when they're charging at you to try and catch up that ground, they're going to be pretty open for that shot to deal 100 damage. So keep that in mind, try and roll away from your enemies rather than towards them, and then try and deal that 100 damage as fast as you can. Now the very last tip that I've got for Zaina is actually just to not forget about that augmented leap. The fact that you can jump up to any ledge that's in the game is actually really powerful. Like I said, Zaina already has some really good mobility, so you can actually escape a lot of, you know, dangerous situations when say J3 or Groz or someone like that is trying to chase you down. You can pretty much outrun them already. But even in a case where say Reeve's chasing you, and obviously Reeve is a very fast character, being able to use that augmented leap is really powerful to get away in those situations. And then even if Reeve uses her vicious leap to actually get up onto that same ledge, I've found that all you need to do is actually just jump off the ledge, and then, you know, Reeve will obviously come down and try and kill you, but then you can just jump back up and her ability is still on cooldown. So definitely don't forget about that augmented leap. It honestly is one of Zaina's biggest strengths. Now lastly, just covering some enemies to watch out for. The only two that I've got on my list here are J3 and Reeve. Like I just mentioned, Reeve is very fast, and obviously she can kind of catch up to you in most cases, and she does deal a lot of damage too, and once she gets close to you, you're barely going to survive that battle, so try and keep your range with Reeve. And then the same goes for J3, but he is a little bit slower, so he's not quite as dangerous when he's say like 10 to 15 meters away from you, because obviously he's going to be a bit slower to try and catch up, but he does have that grapple that allows him to sort of pull you towards him. And much the same as Reeve, once he gets close to you, you are not surviving that. He deals so much damage and he has so much health that there's no chance you're going to get out of that unless you somehow pull a really sneaky maneuver. So keep your eyes peeled for both of these hunters. It's not to say that you can't beat them in a one-on-one, but they definitely have the upper hand, at least when they get close anyway. So that is going to do it for this hunter guide, guys. Zaina is definitely one of my favorite hunters to play, and I do think, like I said, that she is probably the best hunter in the game overall. So hopefully this helped some of you guys out, and if it did, then be sure to leave a like down below. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications, as there's going to be plenty more Star Wars Hunters content like this coming in 2022, with the worldwide launch March, not too far away now. I'm going to be ramping up the content on the channel, so definitely subscribe so you don't miss out. If you guys want to support the content that I make here on YouTube, then consider supporting the channel over on Patreon. The links to that are down in the description. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there in the arena.